Welcome to the MMAnews.com podcast, powered by Pony Cake Sports, with your hosts, Josh Stevens and Tim Thompson. Woo!
Hey there, everybody. We are back with another episode, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Tim Thompson. Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Josh. How you doing tonight, bud?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Getting ready to talk some MMA with you. Of course, we're going to be talking about some of the previous cards that have just happened. UFC 220, Bellator 192. We got some cards coming up with Lorenz Larkin versus Gonzalez, Bellator 193. We have the UFC Fight Night card coming up. And pretty interesting couple weeks.
27.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Fight Night is the following weekend. UFC loading it up here, loading it up to start the year, like you said. And then along with that, we have the one, Phil Baroni, the New York Badass. Interviewed him not too long ago. A great conversation. Funny, as always. Some interesting theories on life and the UFC. And a great dude, Phil Baroni. He may get some slack every now and then. He's a good dude, though.
Cool. And as always, everybody can follow us on Twitter at Ponycake Sports and at Fight Talk Tim. And you guys can always email us, MMA News Podcast at gmail.com. And you guys can always follow us, the podcast-wise, on Podbean. And you guys can also go on iTunes, Google Play, all that other stuff.
Absolutely.
So, man, without any further ado, let's go ahead and move on to UFC 220, which just happened a couple days ago. And pretty interesting card overall, man. What were your first thoughts overall?
First thoughts, I have to give it up to the people of Boston. That card, watching it was electric. TD Garden, obviously a great arena, but you could feel the difference, with it being in the Garden compared to a lot of other places. It was something special. So just the environment, it was a full house. You love when you see the UFC's camera kind of pan around, and it's a full house. People were really, really into it. So I was really excited about that. On top of that, there were some great performances, and outside of the main card, even there were some great performances. The prelim wise, Islam Makhachev, blanking on it now, Josh. I'm turning to you. Islam Makhachev against Gleison Tibau. Tibau looked good. Obviously, he'd been out for a while, but I believe he got popped for something, and so he'd been served a suspension. He'd been out for a while, but Makhachev looked absolutely fantastic. A training partner of one of your guys, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and big left hand put Gleison on his ass and ended the fight.
Yeah, that was one of the fights that I did not see, but I did see after the knockout punch. He did say that because he is a training partner of Khabib Nurmagomedov, that they are going to be training more and more from there on out. So it'll be very interesting to see where his career goes from there. Absolutely will.
And then the other prelim that was obviously got a lot of talk was the Abdul Razak Al Hassan knocking Sabah Homasi out cold. Obviously that first fight, there was some, Al Hassan rocked Homasi, but the fight was stopped prematurely. Homasi was coming on very strong, and it was great to see him rematch. I was glad to see the UFC come out and make sure that was taken care of here. And unlike the last fight, Al Hassan left no doubt whatsoever. Knocked Homasi out cold, like I said. It was a brutal uppercut that just turned the lights out. Homasi was out, cold there for a little while.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was watching that one. That was pretty impressive. But another fighter that was pretty impressive on that card was one Rob Font defeating Thomas Almeida via TKO.
Yeah, Rob Font looked fantastic. Thomas Almeida, known as, was one of the highest, highly touted prospects, coming in, was it last year, after it, and then he ended up obviously losing to Cody Garbrandt. and it seems to have set him back a little bit. There's no, knocking though what Rob Font is doing. This is one fight that I predicted wrong. I thought Almeida would be kind of, back on track here and start piecing things together. I believe he won his last fight, and Rob Font has just looked fantastic. Kind of picked Almeida apart into that second round, and then ends up getting the finish. The only thing I will say, you watch Font's game. I don't know how Almeida didn't see it. It was right hands all day.
Yeah.
It's all every which way, whether it be hooks, uppercuts, whatever. Font was just landing that right hand at will. So props to Rob Font, and interesting to see what's next for him. I know we were talking earlier, potential. He called out Aljamain Sterling, who obviously got knocked out by Marlon Moraes. And Sterling is said to have accepted that fight. Obviously all verbal, but it'd be a great fight to make.
Yeah, that fight would be very interesting. Kind of, why did Rob Font call out one Sterling? Because I feel like that is an odd move for him, coming off of a win such as this, and then calling out a fighter that just lost via knockout.
Well, you still have to remember Aljamain Sterling is still, a big name in this sport. He's still a top 10 fighter.
Yep.
And Almeida obviously, was floating around the top 10, but not necessarily a full-blown top 10 guy. And I think especially to a lot of the casual UFC fans, when you say Aljamain Sterling, there's a little bit more respect there. And, that's no fault to Thomas Almeida. All he's done is gone out there and dominated all fights of them except for a couple, right? So, I don't blame him. He's moving up the rankings. He's taking another big step and, not going for that next level, right? I think Sterling is kind of I'm not calling him a gatekeeper, but he's the bar right now.
Yeah.
Aljamain Sterling is the bar right now. And still very young in his career in his own right. So not that he can't, move up or whatever. So I think the fight just makes a ton of sense for everyone involved. Font gets a true top 10 guy. Sterling gets a top up-and-coming contender to kind of reset himself.
Calvin Kattar versus Shane Burgos. Kattar wins that fight knockout in the third round.
Yeah, absolutely awesome fight. Kattar comes out, and that jab in that first round was fantastic. Burgos throwing heavy. These two love to. Kattar was a local guy for Boston. Burgos is, as we know, loves to just stand in that pocket, and that's what he did here, throwing big body shots. I think Burgos, had a chance to potentially steal that first round. I did not see the judges' scorecard after this fight went official because it was stopped. But Kattar more than likely won that first. I had it for the first for Kattar. The second, Burgos stepped up big time. He seemed to, again, body shots, just ripping body shots galore. And Kattar was able to stay in there and take everything that Burgos threw at him. Burgos was, had all the momentum going into that third. And then Kattar lands that sneaky right hand and kind of stuns Burgos. Burgos stayed on his feet. I think he actually would have been better off falling, because if he would have been able to fall, he may have been able to regain himself on the ground. But then he stays up, and Kattar lands that monster uppercut. I believe he actually landed two. And Burgos was still fighting. He still tried to. I didn't really hear him complain afterwards. About an early stoppage. He tried to stay. He's a tough dude, tough guy. It's the first loss of his career. Shane's a great guy, and Calvin seems to be the real deal here going into 2018.
Where could you see Calvin Kattar go from here?
That's the $1 million question. It's how quickly do you bring him along, right? That's the thing. He's probably, floating around the top 20s right now, right? I wouldn't mind, it's hard because a lot of the guys in front of him are, somewhere around the top 10 guys who have potentially lost a couple fights. Outside of the top 10, there's not really, anyone to pit him against who hasn't lost. Right? You have Yair Rodriguez of the world, the Duo Choi's of the world, Dennis Bermudez of the world. Maybe if Mirsad Bektic, who fights this weekend in Charlotte, that would be a good fight. He lost his last fight, but he's He's fighting in Charlotte this weekend. Who does he fight again? He is fighting, Godofredo Pepe. If he can get a win there in Charlotte, that would be a fight that I would like to see down the road.
All right. Moving on to the co-main event, Tim, we have the champion Daniel Cormier versus Volkan Ozdemir. And this ended with a TKO punch, flurry of punches from Mr. Cormier. And Volkan loses his bid at a championship here in his very short UFC career.
It's I honestly think that that's the worst Daniel Cormier we've seen in the cage in years. In all honesty, I don't know what your thoughts were, but even in his losses against Jones, he didn't look. He just looked bad to me. And obviously, he still went out there. To me, that fight seemed like it was more. He was just able to use his natural instincts and what he's been doing his whole life. With the wrestling, he obviously was worlds above Volkan Ozdemir, but I don't know if there was an injury there or what. Listen, DC's never a skinny guy by any means, but he looked heavy to me. He looked slow to me. He was sloppy with his boxing, and obviously, with all that said, he still goes out there and dominates the. Didn't dominate early first round, but dominates the fight and does exactly what he said he was going to do.
Well, considering Mr. Cormier is the only fighter I cheer for when he actually makes weight, he is, in my opinion, man, I thought he actually looked pretty good. I think he looked sluggish to start the first, and I thought that his striking was definitely not on point as I thought it was going to be, but you could definitely tell that Volkan definitely does have some striking capability. He did tag Daniel a couple times, but I think after that, his true wrestling did come out, and I thought, man, either Volkan's got no wrestling, or Daniel Cormier still got that huge wrestling pedigree where he can't be fucked with, and he just made Volkan look like a ragdoll in there. When he wanted to take him down, easily took him down, kept him on the mat when he wanted to. But to your point, I do think he did look somewhat sluggish when he did start the fight, for sure.
That first half of the first round, if you go back and watch it, the punches that he was throwing were lazy.
Well, and plus, sorry to cut you off again, but plus his stance when he strikes is just the ugliest stance in the world. So I think that also plays into a fact in my eyes. When I look at it, I think it just looks lazy. But in reality, I don't know if that's actually true.
No, but like I said, I mean, listen, we watched enough of DC now. Now this fight, it looked like a wrestler stepping into the cage for one of the first times. The first half of the first round, he, like you said, his stances, whatever. But we've seen that out of DC before. There were a ton of just arm punches being thrown. His takedown attempts were sloppy at best. He was reaching consistently just to try to get in close. I get that he had a game plan going into that fight, but if you go back and watch, there was no setup to any of it. There was no setup whatsoever. It was sloppy arm punches to get close enough to get an inside leg trip, work that single. I mean, Volkan, he fought off. He showed that he has wrestling. It just showed that DC's done that his whole life, and he's an Olympic caliber wrestler. It's just too much too soon for Volkan. Plain and simple. That's all it is. He'll be back. He's good. He's going to be a top contender for a while. I would love to see him. I don't know who I want to see him fight next. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know. But I hope. I'm happy for DC. I'm a huge DC fan. Seems like one of the nicest guys in the sport. Just in my opinion, that is the worst we've seen DC look in a long time.
Who is Volkan fought and beat so far in the UFC? I know it's Jimmy Manuwa, Kirkunov, and OSP. Okay, so actually that was funny. I was gonna say that he should fight somebody like a name with like an OSP, but I forgot that he even fought OSP split decision back in last year.
Yeah, I don't know if I would, potentially like to see. I mean, really, like who's gonna fight next? A Shogun?
Yeah.
I mean, Shogun's on a winning streak right now, but I mean that just seems like a drastic. You could headline a fight night with that card.
Isn't this a weird thing to think of, though, Tim? You look at his resume that he does have, and yeah, he did have a very good record going into the UFC with only one loss on his record. But when he entered the UFC, he fought OSP with a split decision win. He fought Misha Kirkunov, which was a first round knockout within 30 seconds. Jimmy Manawa within 45 seconds, won with a knockout, and then he was given a title shot right then and there. Do you think that was just the fact that they needed somebody to throw to Daniel Cormier, or do you think that he was deserving of that title shot?
No, they won 100%. It was, listen, you go back, you mentioned the fight with OSP. That's a fight that, again, not taking anything away from him, but I believe Volkan lost that fight. But whatever, he gets the nod there. He gets two impressive knockouts against Misha Cirkunov, who was a big up-and-comer, right? And then against Jimmy Manuel. That was the big one there. Listen, the fact remains, if Alexander Gustafsson was healthy, that's what the UFC wants. He's just coming off, I believe, his shoulder surgery now. So he needs to heal up. I don't know what they're going to do in the light heavyweight division, honestly. I don't know who they're going to pit up against DC next.
Well, maybe we have that answer with the winner of this next fight that we're going to talk about, which is Stipe Miocic versus Juan Francis Ngannou. And with Stipe winning this fight, and we'll get to that fight in just a second, there is all that talk going on right now with Stipe possibly being matched up with Daniel Cormier, but Daniel Cormier not, I don't want to say completely open to it. He's receptive to the idea, but he also doesn't want to jump into it from what he says if Cain Velasquez is back and 100% healthy.
Well, yes, but you're forgetting something. You're forgetting that Stipe Miocic is not a true heavyweight.
Correct. And Daniel Cormier is not a true light heavyweight.
Exactly. So I would love for them to do that fight at a 220, at a 225 for no one's belt, and see what happens. Kind of like they've talked about. I don't think they will. I think if they end up doing it, they'll have someone come up, go up or go down, whatever it may be. But the UFC might have to do that. I mean, there is no one, until Alexander Gustafsson is healthy, there is no one right now, in my opinion, that is deserving of a title shot in the light heavyweight division. And when you go back to heavyweight, again, I know you said we'll talk about it in a little bit here, but who's next? I mean, that's the question. I mean, it has to be Verdum, you would think, but do you really want, Verdum to get another title shot? Probably not. He's kind of on the UFC's shit list at the moment. I mean, outside of that, you have Mark Hunt, who's planning to leave the UFC after his contract, his next fight, which is the last on his contract, I believe. And then you have Cain Velasquez, if he can come back and get a win, that would be 2 in a row for him. It would have to be Cain, right?
You would think so. But let me ask you this. If they decided to do Stipe versus Daniel Cormier, and that's a big if, right?
Yep.
Who would, and say it's for a heavyweight fight, who would, theoretically, in your mind, be the heavier fighter on fight night?
I would think and I would hope it would still be it would still be Stipe.
It's a good question, isn't it?
It is a good question. I would still hope it would be Stipe, because especially with where Daniel Cormier is in terms of his age, where he is in his life, he can't afford to be going up to, and you know what? Maybe he is anyway, but it can't be afforded to put on whatever muscle or whatever and get up to. I mean, obviously, just be a bigger dude, but 230, 240 pounds, and then expect, whatever 5-6 months later to go back down to 205.
Agreed.
That's how people, have kidney failure.
I agree with that. I'm sorry for jumping over Francis Ngannou, but let's talk about his performance in this fight, or lack thereof. Francis Ngannou looked like he didn't even train for this fight. Didn't even attempt a takedown defense at all. I think it was it may have been all a quote unquote hype train and he may have got that stuck in his head. Now, I know there's a lot of people thinking that. Of course, he probably trained for this fight because he's a UFC fighter, he's an MMA fighter, you train for fights. But was Stipe just that much better than Francis? Was this too early for Francis Ngannou?
I like how you say he probably trained for this fight. You schmuck. Listen, he trained for it. It is same thing that it was with Volkan. Too much, too soon. He's a scary guy with a monster right hand. But at the end of the day, all it came down to is Stipe Miocic is the master of implementing game plans. And it helps that he has the power as well, but he implemented his game plan to a T. Freaking get on your bike and run, avoid everything that he has. Get out of the first round. I guarantee I would put money that the game plan that Stipe's team made up was whatever you got to do, just get out of the first round. That's it. And then they had a game plan for rounds 2 through 5. That's exactly what I think. And then you saw it. He just implemented, just lean on him, just use up as much energy as you can. And then you saw even with Francis's power, you saw, the power's there, but his boxing isn't necessarily clean. You saw Stipe get the better of the boxing at times in the second and third round. He was still nervous to trade, but he was getting the better of the boxing with that stiff jab to the overhand right. That's where he landed a couple of big shots. And then obviously you mentioned, listen, the guy trains takedowns, but this is where, obviously the UFC talks about it nonstop about, he's only 5 years into his career and he was homeless and this and that. This is where living in France and not going, he needs to go into one of the big American teams is what he needs to do to get his wrestling on par.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what he's got to do, because the game plan has been not that everyone can implement it, but the game plan has been given on how to beat one Francis Ngannou. And you see it a lot in the heavyweight division. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who have amazing power, but they're so big they can't, their muscles and everything take up so much energy. It zaps them, once they get out of, a round and a half.
I agree with you. And kind of because we were just playing make-believe matchmaker with the Daniel Cormier and the Stipe Miocic, I just kind of wanted to ask you a question now. Stipe Miocic is now known as possibly the greatest heavyweight champion of all time because he has now had, 3 title defenses?
Correct.
Do you think if Daniel Cormier came from Strikeforce to the UFC as a true heavyweight without dropping down to light heavyweight because of Cain Velasquez, do you think we could be saying that about one Daniel Cormier?
I hate being the what if guy. I hate doing it.
Let me explain my question a little bit further, because if you look at some of his resume that he does have, Antonio Bigfoot Silva, knockout in the first round when he was with Strikeforce. Josh Barnett, unanimous decision. Josh Barnett's a heavyweight fighter. Beat Frank Mir, unanimous decision. Beat Roy Nelson, unanimous decision. Beat Dan Henderson. Regardless, Dan Henderson is not a heavyweight fighter, but still a very good fighter in his own. I think, personally, we could be saying the same thing if he was still at the heavyweight division, rather than dropping down to the light heavyweight.
I do, and I will take you a step further. I truly believe, and again, I love Stipe. It's no fault to his own. I get, it's the him against the world mentality, and rightfully so. But it's, if Daniel Cormier would stay at heavyweight, I believe that he wins that fight. If Cain Velasquez gets healthy, that's the fight to make. That's the fight. Stipe came in at the perfect time. He caught, JDS at the tail end of his career. That was his loss, their war that they had all the way back in 2014. And then, let's see, he fights Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt, obviously, ended his career. Andrei Arlovsky ended his career. Fabricio Verdum, that's probably his best win, and that's the fight I would like to see happen again. But Fabricio is no spring chicken.
Yeah, and plus you got to think still too with Fabricio Verdum. He's in the UFC now, and he was still trying to figure out what kind of fighter he's going to be. He was mainly known as a ground fighter, and now he's had all this success standing up. And
when he beat Verdum, I mean, it was for the belt.
No, yeah, I agree.
I mean, Verdum was who he is. I'm not that win was much deserved. He was trying to trade with Stipe, which didn't make any sense for for someone of his grappling caliber. So again, not taking anything away from Stipe, but that's going to be the question. Especially if he defends one more time or two more times, he gets to that. How is he going to be defined as the greatest heavyweight of all time?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, that's enough of UFC 220. We are going to move on. We kind of took a long time on that. I apologize. We're going to move on to Bellator 192 real quick. We're just going to hit on the couple main fights here. And the big one, obviously. Actually, I'm going to go with our boy, Aaron Pico. We've talked about him over and over again. Body punch, knockout, impressive.
I love the body shot. Vicious, knocked out Shane Crutchton, who's a fantastic dude as well. So obviously not how he saw the fight going, but yeah, that body shot was just vicious. I will say the celebration afterwards, a little weird. Didn't really know how to feel about that. I don't know if he was a matador or what he was, but yeah, very, very impressive. Back-to-back impressive wins for one Aaron Pico after his debut loss.
Michael Chandler won his fight, unanimous decision.
This was my best performance of the weekend, in all honesty, was by Michael Chandler. I personally thought that Goiti Yamauchi, a lot of casual fans may not know who he is. He's the real deal. He was being considered, to be the next big thing for Bellator at that weight class. And people were saying that it was the toughest matchup, for Michael Chandler, and he didn't blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. And he went out there and just put it on Goiti. Goiti landed a front kick, I believe it was, that rocked Michael a little bit in the first round. But other than that, it was vintage Michael Chandler. Took him down and just beat him up. So good for Michael Chandler. Interested to see what happens between him and Brent Primus. Obviously, he's saying that he doesn't really care about fighting Primus going forward. He's looking for bigger fights, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Rory McDonald wins the championship from one Douglas Lima decision after 5 rounds.
Not what people saw coming, I don't think. I don't think anyone saw a war where Rory looked vulnerable. Douglas Lima is no joke. I know you're a big fan of one Douglas Lima. And he took Rory to task. That leg was unreal. I mean, just grotesque. Seems like there was no actual structural damage to it. Rory came out on social media and said the reports about his leg being messed up and his hand being broken were false. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was pretty disgusting looking.
It was nasty. For him to, I know he was on the MMA Hour saying how it was so bad he considered giving up, just having the fight called. So for it to be that bad, but you saw it. It was I can't imagine the type of pain he's in this week. Can't imagine.
And the main event within the main event, we have Chael Sonnen versus Quinton Rampage Jackson. 3 rounds, decision for Mr. Chael Sonnen. What is Tom? What's his nickname that Tom loves so much? The American Gangster, is that it?
The American Gangster, yes, sir.
It's ridiculously awesome.
No, just weird. Now I will say, I know there's been a lot of talk in the MMA world. Kind of worked out perfectly the way Bellator and the UFC fights played out. Like everything, kind of like the second that DC and Volkan ended, that's when Rampage and Chael started. So it gets to see a lot of back and forth, go back and forth between everything. Chael looked good. I mean, you knew that what his game plan was going to be, but for him to implement it on Rampage, who had a lot of weight on, I mean, a ton of weight on him. Rampage looked like a friggin' monster. Oh my gosh, that guy! I mean, I love Quinton Rampage Jackson. I wish that Bellator didn't do him dirty and would have put him against a striker in the first round of the Grand Prix. In all honesty, but at this, it is what it is. So, props for Chael. Now he gets the winner of
Frank Mir
Frank
and
Mir
Fedor.
and Fedor Emelianenko. I mean, I would love to see it. I think Frank Mir, it's not even close in all honesty. I think Frank Mir is a true heavyweight. He's a big dude. I think he would take Chael to task. But Chael against Fedor, I mean, that's Bellator's dream, right? That is Bellator's, like, it's just perfect. It's the absolute two legends in the sport. It would be great.
There was talk with this Bellator heavyweight tournament that they may reseed it, and after that first round, just for the fact that they may try to match them up a little bit closer in weight. So we may see who's Ryan Bader fighting. I'm drawing a blank.
He's not fighting King Mo. Is he fighting? He's fighting Roy Nelson.
Shit, I can't remember. Well, regardless, so there's another fight where it's two lighter fighters, and there's talk about having them be sized up with Chael Sonnen and with the reseeding of it, which, in my opinion, if you have a bracket, stick to it, but that's just me.
Well, no, that would be stupid as hell. I mean, why are you? Then you're just trying to, advance the lighter fighter for no reason, in my opinion. I mean, I don't get that whatsoever. Here, Matt Mitrione fights Roy Nelson, Ryan Bader fights King Mo, and then, like we said, Frank Mir fights Fedor Emelianenko. So, I mean, King Mo obviously is King Mo and Ryan Bader are both 205ers. And then it doesn't make any sense because if they wanted to do that, then they just would have put them on the same side of the bracket to begin with. So
I agree.
It's I don't see that happening at all.
Hopefully not. Moving on, we have Bellator 193 coming up, and that is headlined by Lorenz Larkin and Fernando Gonzalez. What are your thoughts on that card?
It's an interesting card. There's it's my one pet peeve with Bellator, if I have one. Not that they're not great fights, but you come off such a high at Bellator 192. You want to have like young up and coming fighters, guys who can make a name, I guess. I'm sorry, having Kendall Grove versus AJ Matthews as a main card fight, it doesn't make any sense for me. This is the time to be putting in your Taiwan Claxtons, your Tyrell Fortune, who's on the undercard. Don't put him on the undercard. You put all this money into these young wrestlers. Now's the time. Logan Storley, all these guys who you put all this money into and this investment, now's the time to do it. This isn't taking anything away from Lorenz or Sayed Awad, JJ, all great guys, but use this platform. This is when you're supposed to be at your peak. Utilize it to the fullest. And I don't think they do a very good job at doing that, in all honesty. To that point, I mentioned Tyrell Fortune fighting on the undercard against Joe Hernandez. Joe Hernandez on a couple fight losing streak, but if you're a wrestling fan like I am, I will be interested to see what Tyrell Fortune does on the undercard. Outside of that, my favorite fight of the night is Sayed Awad against JJ Ambrose. Sayed, obviously, a longtime Bellator fighter, and fighting JJ, who's making his debut coming over from Australia on a 5-fight winning streak. Hasn't lost. He lost the beginning of 2016. But like I said, 5-fight winning streaks look fantastic. See how he translates. You don't see a lot of Australians, something like that, going to Bellator. So I'm interested to see how that all pans out. Sayed, obviously, he's a staple for Bellator, and back-to-back big wins for him, and that KO of Zach Freeman is a big deal. So that's my fight of the night. And then can Lorenz Larkin, just forget about 2017, gets the payday, and it kind of reminds me of like in the NFL when players get their payday and then just can't produce. Now he fought Douglas Lima, who we just saw what he did to Rory in a 5-round fight, and then got KO'd by Paul Daly, who's one of the best knockout artists in welterweight history, right? So not trying to take anything away from Lorenz Larkin, but this is a must-win fight in my opinion. And Fernando Gonzalez is hot right now. A lot of people may not know who he is, but he has a lot of fights. He has a lot of experience, and beating Brendan Ward and Brandon Gertz in 2017. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. So very interested to see how that plays out here this weekend. Friday, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like the fact that you did touch on the issue that I think Bellator does run into, and they go from such a high of a card that they just had, and now they're going to a card such as this, where the card top to bottom is not the greatest, it's not the worst, but how do you promote somebody such as a Kendall Grove over some of your up and coming prospects? And I think you explained it perfectly, and I think that's where Bellator needs to work on their issues.
Well, and this isn't a Bellator only problem, right? I mean, you're coming off of UFC 220, which was a big card, and now you're going to UFC Charlotte, which there's great fights on there, obviously, which we're going to talk about. I guess the difference is, in my opinion, is the youth movement and the way that they've brought in guys. It doesn't make sense to me to have them on the undercard. Like, what are you protecting? What are you saving? What are you gaining by having them on the undercard? You're telling me that Steve Cazzola versus Jake Smith is going to make a difference more, than versus Tyrell Fortune and Joe Hernandez? To the casual fan, they don't know the difference between any of those four guys, in all honesty. So promote these guys. Tyrell Fortune, you have a heavyweight monster, college wrestler, Team USA wrestler. Make people know who he is. Promote the shit out of him now. You already spent so much money, bringing him in. Promote him.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to UFC on Fox 27, headlined by Ronaldo Jacare Souza and Derek Brunson. But kind of the same thing that you did say. Such as a fighter on that card, number 2 on the card, Nico Price. I know he's coming off of a loss, but he has been exciting as a fighter to watch. He's had a knockout. I believe he's had a triangle or an arm triangle submission. And I think him being this low on the card is kind of the same issue that we just discussed.
I'm not. I believe he's going to be the Fight Pass prelim main event, as they like to put it, which is a joke. But I'm not going to bash it, because actually this card, from top to bottom, I like this card more than I like 220. In all honesty, I don't have the title fights, but especially when you look at the main card. Listen, Drew Dober versus Frank Camacho. Camacho is coming off of that war that he had with Damian Brown in Australia. So that's something to build on there. You have Gregor Gillespie, who is a top up-and-coming prospect, someone that people should know, undefeated record against Jordan Rinaldi. So obviously, that deserves to be in the main event, in my opinion. And then you have the co-main and the main event, obviously, Dennis Bermudez and Andre Touchy-Fili. Bermudez, perennial contender at 145, and Fili, making his way back. And then the potential number 1 contender fight between Souza and Brunson. So I don't knock. This is actually one of the rare occasions where I think the UFC did it right. And even the FS1 card, right? You have Bobby Green, you have Eric Koch, you have Mirsad Bektic, who's still one of the top up-and-coming prospects. Caitlin Chukagian, who is a name to watch, is making her, I believe it's her flyweight debut. So interested to see how that all works. Vince Pichel, and then you mentioned Nico Price and Austin Arnett. Josh, I'm telling you, I don't know if you know who Austin Arnett is, but you are going to love this kid. Up-and-comer, lost his last fight on the Contender Series, so kind of interesting to see him get the call here. I know it was a last-minute replacement. But no, top to bottom, I really, really, really like this card, Josh.
Okay, that sounds good, man. Anything else on this card, or you want to move on to some of the news in the MMA world, and then your interview with one Phil Baroni?
You know what? Let's get Phil on the phone first, then we'll talk a little bit of news. How about that?
All right, that sounds good. Let's go ahead and get him on the phone then real quick.
We're here with the New York Badass, Phil Baroni. Phil, how you doing?
What's up, man?
Not too much. Thank you for taking out the time here to talk with us. So let's talk about you. Let's start with how were your holidays?
Bah humbug, bro. Bah humbug.
Bah
I
humbug?
want to talk about holidays, man. I'm called the New York Badass. You don't call the New York Badass, wake him up in the morning for an interview about the holidays, bro.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about the important stuff then. Let's talk about what have you been up to then? Obviously, you're still doing the pro wrestling thing?
Yeah, I've been getting some pro wrestling in. I mean, I'm not sure, man. I'm thinking about, going for the NWA title, man. I've been seeing a lot of talk about the NWA titles. The belts just changed hands, and I'm thinking about, putting my name in the hat for the NWA Heavyweight Championship of the world. Growing up, I watched Ric Flair and all the other, Harley Race, all the greats all had that belt. And coming from a wrestling family, Captain Lou Albano, being from New York and being my great uncle, I've decided to go into the pro wrestling route rather than MMA, just sticking to MMA. I'm still fighting. I'll be fighting in Japan soon, but I'm also pro wrestling.
So in terms of pro wrestling, is there a gimmick out there that you like right now, don't like? For instance, when I look at
Go ahead. Not so much a gimmick, man. Not so much a gimmick, but I mean, I really can't stand all these stinking illegals, coming in this lucha, hopping the fence with these masks, these illegals, and just running crazy on this lucha underground. That's what I have a problem with. Coming from New York, growing up around the block in Queens, from where Donald Trump, our president of the United States, grew up. I'm really against these illegals, and I really think we should build a wall. I mean, I'm waiting for this wall. I already put my name in, as to be one of the foremen on this construction, and I'm waiting to build this wall. But before we get this wall, I mean, I'll just have to go to Lucha Underground and get rid of some of these illegals.
So obviously you're a big fan then of the president himself, Mr. Donald Trump. What are your thoughts then of all these people? You've heard a lot in the fight game. People coming out saying how much they don't like him, don't agree with his policies. Don't want to talk too much politics here, but just what are your thoughts on people in the sport kind of coming out and
Well, he should win some fights. Make a lot of money like me, and then they will. They will appreciate the president. They won't want handouts. A lot of these UFC fighters, they want handouts. They're always begging for bonuses after the fight. They want handouts. You got to work hard, earn it yourself. That's what I believe. That's what I've done. And that's why I don't have to work or do anything ever again, because I won the fights. I made the right investments with Bitcoin and stuff like that.
You talk about the UFC. What are your thoughts just on the state of the UFC right now as a whole?
We're in transition period right now. Everybody was against the UFC. The way it was. With the Fertitas and the small little in-house, non-union, station casino gimmick they were running. That was how the UFC was working. Now it's going to be a bigger sport. Now they're talking about negotiating fights per fight and stuff like that. It's become a big business, more like boxing. I mean, it's the evolution of the sport. I'm not sure right now where it's going to head. I mean, I feel that we'll go to route of boxing with guys like McGregor and stuff. Having the big fights and the UFC as a promotion. With the WWE model that they use. Maybe fall into the wayside a little bit. We'll see with the boxing.
What are your thoughts on Conor McGregor?
I like Conor McGregor. He's reading the book I wrote. I like a little bit of some retribution from the guy.
Let's talk about a little bit about your career here real quick. Obviously, you and I started talking right before the Robbie Lawler fight. What are your thoughts on some of the guys from, the good old days, as I put it when we were speaking before, the Robbie Lawlers of the world who are still out there and and going into big fights.
Yeah, the guys are like, well, we're the renegades. We're the, we're the renegades. We're the guys that didn't want to grow up, didn't want to get a 9-to-5, wanted to kick ass for a living. You know what I mean? That's it. You just get by that way. And now the guys, that is a career. That there's a projection. There's a way to make money. There's just there's a route. You can wrestle in college, then you can go into the UFC, and then you can, there's a dynamic there. When I got into it, we were done wrestling in college, and we just wanted to see who was the toughest motherfucker. You know what I mean? It was let's just see who's the baddest motherfucker. And then after we did that in America, we went to Japan. Let's see who's the baddest motherfucker no matter what. No rules, no nothing. Let's just see who the toughest motherfucker is. And we all signed up, and that's what we did. It's just progression of the sport. Where athletes started, getting involved more so than just really rough dudes.
You mentioned before that you're going to be fighting again in Japan?
Yeah, I'm in some talks, I'm in some real talks. I have a great relationship with Saki Kabara over in Japan. Things didn't work out this New Year's, but, there's some talks.
Is there anyone in particular that you're looking at?
Well, there's a couple of fights, There's a rematch with Manoa. I was talking to World FC in Korea about that fight. That's very interesting. And then in Japan, I'll probably fight, the up-and-coming Japanese, whoever that is, but I'm not sure of a name right now.
Is there any desire to go out there? Obviously, they have a big wrestling scene out there as well. Kind of go out there, fight, wrestle, and kind of put it all together?
Oh, that would be great. New Japan, New Japan's huge. It's probably, Lucha Underground, New Japan, WWE. Those are the big promotions right now, and so that would be great. I have a follow to Japan. I wrestled pro wrestle for Inoki in Japan on his birthday, so that's the future. That could be an option in the future.
A few more minutes here with the New York Badass Phil Baroni. Again, Phil, we really appreciate the time. I want to ask you about your friendship with Stephan Bonnar. How did you guys become so close like that?
Oh, we're not friends. We're not friends.
No?
We're not friends. We're tag team partners. We both got into wrestling. I got into it before him. I'm much better than him. I figured Stephan Bonnar has a little bit of a name. He's a little bit of a name. If I throw him as my tag team partner, it'll help me get matches. But he really can't work a match. He's not good enough yet. But Stephan Bonnar, see, the thing about Stephan Bonnar is, and I think he's the greatest heel in all of MMA, because he's the man that ruined the sport for all the fighters. He had that fight with Stephan Bonnar at the end of the Ultimate Fighter season, and he put over, the union gimmick and the Ultimate Fighter gimmick, the no union gimmick and the Ultimate Fighter gimmick. Whereas you can get on a reality show TV, make very little money for the next 10 years, but be MMA famous. You know what I mean? And
yep.
Not really famous, just the MMA bubble famous, and you can make your little $100,000 to win that tournament, and get your 5 minutes of reality show TV fame. See, he and that bum Forrest Griffin, they made that seem attainable. When it was guys like me, and Mark Coleman, the Hammer House, Kevin Randleman, Brandon Vera, we were beasts. We were Olympians. We were the next generation of fighter. Former Olympians, world medalists. Stephan Bonnar, he was the everyday, Division III basketball player, who got in there and had a fight. He was anyone could do this shit. You don't have to be an Olympic gold medalist. You don't have to be a super good athlete. You can just be a Division III basketball player and go out there and you'll make $50,000 and be on a reality show. That's what ruins the sport for the real fighter, Stephan Bonnar.
It's very
That's my take on that.
Sure. I want to ask you about, you mentioned...
the quote is that Stephan Bonnar and the Ultimate Fighter ruined the UFC for everybody. I mean, if you want the quote, Stephan Bonnar ruined everything for everybody in Ultimate Fighters. If you want a headline.
There we go. You're making a headline for us as advertised. Real quick, I want to ask you mentioned Hammer House, Mark Coleman. You still talk to him at all?
Let's just revisit that one more time. Mark Coleman, 45 years old, not training on a bender, calls me up and says, "Listen, bro, I'm coming to Vegas. I got a fight with Stephan Bonnar in 6 weeks." I said, "All right, get your ass over here." Well, it took him about 4 weeks to get here. I mean, when we did the clock, we had 30 days. He had 30 days. The 30 days. I mean, you can call up and ask him. He beat Stephan Bonnar, and he did it. And that just goes to show, and I trained him for it, of course, but that just goes to show you the difference in athlete from a Mark Coleman, closing in on 50, beating a prime Stephan Bonnar, a typical Ultimate Fighter, a typical Ultimate Fighting character for a reality show. That's the difference in the gap. At 50 years old, he can beat him in an MMA fight. You follow that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the difference in athletic premise and background.
Right. Like Royce Gracie, he was the best at jiu-jitsu, and then Kevin Jackson, he was an Olympic gold medalist, and Jerry Bolander, he was the best that the Lions had to offer when he armbarred Kevin Jackson. Like that was the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Olympic gold medalist. Now guys are talking about, he was a D1 wrestler. I mean, I took second in the nation in Division I. So did Daniel Cormier. And you see what we do in wrestling, and you see how we use our wrestling. He's not Hammer House, but he's an AKA guy where I've trained. And then you'll see somebody that they say he's a Division I wrestler. That doesn't mean shit. You know what I mean? Well, what does that mean? You on the team, you will walk on. So there's a big difference between the Division I wrestler now and the All-American now and the Jiu-Jitsu black belt where the guy just happened to go to the school for 12 years and he just gave him the black belt because he's been there for 12 years paying the bills. So he's a black belt and now he wants to fight the UFC. You're following the difference? Over time, it's definitely softened up. I mean, there are guys that I used to smash 10 years ago and I can still go to the gym. I see them there now and smash them and they have black belts. But I can take the belt off their neck. I can take the belt from around their waist and tie it around their neck and strangle them just like I could do 10 years ago. So the belt doesn't mean shit. It's just about time. So the caliber of that, there's more black belts in the UFC now. Yeah, because there's more dudes doing jiu-jitsu. There's really not better athletes. There's really not better wrestlers. There's really not better submission grapplers. All that or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense?
Yeah, makes.
All right.
No, you're making a lot of sense. I want to know.
Yeah, because like if you were a D1 wrestler, like guys brag about that. Oh, he's a D1 wrestler. So what? That's the least thing you can be. Wrestle in college for 5 years. So what? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Back when I was in UFC, you had to be a champion. You had to be the best of the best. You had to be a Mark Coleman, an Olympian, a Mark Kerr. You know what I mean? You couldn't just be some D1 wrestler from Boise who nobody knows. What the fuck is that? Who's that? You had to be the best of the best. And people had to want to see you fight in UFC. People back in the day wanted to see what I could do in UFC. I already had, 17, kickboxing fights, 10 kickboxing fights. I was a two-time All-American. So they wanted to see what I could do in UFC. Whereas now today, guys are just training to be UFC fighters. They're coming into their karate gym or their jiu-jitsu gym, and they're saying, an armbar works, and triangle works, and double leg, and these 3 punches, and this kick, and this knee works, and this is what I'm going to train. Where they're not super athletes coming in to test your skills. They're trained UFC fighters. There are 5 or 10 techniques that work mostly, the rear naked choke, blah, 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 and guys train those positions. Whereas back in the day, you would bring what you got, and you would just you wanted to see what works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That makes it.
You know what I mean? Right now, if you wanted to fight UFC, you know what to do.
Yep.
You go to the fucking Randy Couture's, you train a little, hit the pads, you take a jiu-jitsu class, you practice five takedowns, and now you can be a UFC fighter. Whereas back in the day, that was not the case.
Yep.
Anyone could join Randy Couture's gym and get a fight in 6 months now. That's the difference.
That's some interesting
So
stuff.
it's watered down.
It's watered down. Yeah, a little bit oversaturated market. I hear what you're saying.
Oh, very oversaturated, super watered down. I mean, when I was a kid, I would turn on channel 15. I would just see two guys boxing, and I would change the channel just like everybody else. Well, that's how UFC's getting now. I turn on FS1. I see two guys that I don't know who the fuck they are doing the same moves with the same style against each other, almost like boxing, and I change the channel.
Phil, I know you're very busy, so just a few quick questions before we let you go. Do you have a fighter that you'd like to watch right now?
I like those guys from New York. I like those guys from Sarah Longo's gym. You know what I mean? I like those guys. I like the way they talk. I like the way they fight. I used to train at that gym back in the day. For whatever reason, that's not where I stayed. But I think Ray Longo is a good guy, and I like those guys.
Is there, if you could fight anyone, you say, Phil Baroni, you get a chance to end your career, you get one more fight against anyone in the world, who would it be?
Well, it'll be against a fucking champion, you know what I mean? It'll be against a champion. Whoever the champion is at 185. Who's the champion right now at 185?
That's Robert Whittaker.
Well, Robert Whittaker.
All right.
That's who it would be. Or whoever would be in Japan, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I'd like to go back to Japan, the land of the rising sun, and maybe fight in a middleweight Grand Prix, you know, like I did back in Pride. You know, twice I fought for the world title in Bushido and Pride. You know,
yep.
for the championship of the world. I'd like to win a Grand Prix. That would be the greatest. You know, the way Krokop did. That would be a great ending.
Yep, absolutely. And the last question I have for you, I just want to know your thoughts on Dana White. Obviously, you had some dealings with him in the past, and just do you think, you know, he's looking out? You had a lot of...
You know, Dana White was my friend for a long time. You know, I took his side on a couple things, and I was on teams where they were going against him, where I took his side. And he knows that he did me dirty, super dirty the last time. The last time we had the dealing. So he did me super dirty. He knows it, and he owes me. So we'll just see what's up with this boxing gimmick. Is this new boxing gimmick going on? So I want to put this out there too. You did me dirty like a mofo, and he knows it. So we'll just see what's up with this boxing gimmick. He can box a little bit.
We will have to wait and see. The New York Badass Phil Baroni. Phil, we really appreciate the time. Before we let you go, I'll leave
Good interview, bro. When is this going to be?
It'll be on MMAnews.com. You will be the headlining interview, which only Phil Baroni would be for our podcast, the MMA News podcast. So I will make sure to get you all that information. Before I let you go, is there anything you want to promote? Any sponsors? Anyone you want to build up?
Check out my company, Future Legend. You know, we sponsor TNA right now. Future Legend. Check it out. It's Explode the company. If you're going to be something in the future, check out this brand. Paulie Malignaggi is my partner from New York. You know, he's the guy that whooped on Conor McGregor in sparring. You know, I was there. Yeah, I was there. He whooped on him. That's my partner. And you know, the whole thing got out of whack. You know, I was right there because he came to Vegas, and I saw the whole thing, and you know, they kept him in there the whole time. He got tired. It was ridiculous. We were supposed to do 3 rounds. We did like 9, 10 rounds. You know, we weren't even warmed up. We just came in to help you. So the whole thing's a big job, and they're afraid to box Paulie anyway.
Phil, best of luck with the boxing, the wrestling, the MMA, Future Legend. Make sure to check out everything Phil Baroni's got going on right now. Phil, again, thank you so much for the time, and we'll be talking to you real soon.
Take it easy.
That was our buddy Good old the New York badass Phil Baroni. Never short on words, is he?
No, definitely not. He's a weird dude.
Well, you gotta love when you open up an interview and you say, "Hey, how are your holidays?" And he just tells you, "Hey, you don't wake up the New York badass to freaking ask him how his holidays were." Next question. Gotta love when a fighter starts it off that way.
How long has this been in the works for you, Tim, with Phil Baroni?
A while. Listen, dude's a busy guy. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people, know Phil Baroni as this badass, but I mean, he is. But he kind of mentioned it in there. He made a lot of money early on with Bitcoin. Made a lot of money there. He's got his club that obviously he has in Vegas with Stephan Bonnar. I know I love how he says that Stephan Bonnar ruined MMA for everyone. But no, it's been a while. It's been a while. He's a busy guy. I don't fault him.
All right, sounds good. All right, man, let's go ahead and move on some of the news in MMA, and we'll wrap this thing up. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, dude. First things first, we have Gunnar Nelson versus Darren Till. Could be headline at UFC London.
Hey, it's coming up in March. It's Gunnar called him, or Till called Gunnar out first, I think, and they had a Twitter back and forth. And today, John Kavanagh came out and basically said it's looking like it's going to happen. They're just waiting on Till to sign his contract. So this card needs this fight, in my opinion. It's the easy way to sell out that London card is with this as a main event. So I really, really hope this fight happens.
Earlier this week, I believe it was just yesterday, we had one Nate Diaz post on Instagram and what was it? Was it Twitter too, or just Instagram?
I think it was just Instagram. I don't know.
Posted on Instagram that he may be coming back for a fight, and what was the hashtag that he used? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't. The whole thing was just weird, though. Like, he started off by, like, talking shit. But it sounded like he was saying, like, how no one wants to fight him, and he was just done with the MMA game, and then just ended it with, I'm a fight in May or June. Like, it was just, like, it was a weird, it was typical, Diaz. Dude knows how to get people attention. Instantly, the whole world blew up. I know you and I were talking here pre-show. Dana White was on TMZ today and said that he's going to call Nate Diaz today.
Do you have that? You have that clip still pulled up?
I don't have it pulled up. Oh, you know what? Here, I do have it pulled up. I take that back.
Yeah, go ahead, play it real quick.
Oh, hold on. Oh, jeez, Josh. Now you put me on the spot.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll talk about one more thing real quick. The two fighters that instantly called him out right away were, one, Eddie Alvarez, and two, Kevin Lee.
Yeah, Kevin Lee is one thing that would be interesting. I guess the big one, though, obviously that kind of makes sense to me, is one, Eddie Alvarez. They have a history there. Eddie Alvarez, when Eddie Alvarez beat Diaz's teammate and friend Gilbert Melendez, Diaz was there, and they had some words backstage. So that's kind of where this all comes from. So I would love to see that happen. What if that's a couple of Ultimate Fighter coaches right there? How about that, Josh?
Yeah, that would be possible too.
Here is the Dana White clip from TMZ here not too long ago.
We spoke before, you and I, and you said that you didn't think that there was a very good chance that either one of the Diaz brothers was going to fight again. And now all of a sudden Nate is saying he wants to fight in May or June.
I'll tell you what. I'll call them today and make him an offer.
Really? What would the offer be?
I don't know. I got to think. I got to look at the rankings, see where everybody is. I will make Nate Diaz an offer to fight.
He ends it with today. Gets cut off there. But props again. That's the TMZ Sports. Dana was on with them, and he's saying he's going to offer him a fight. He kind of makes it seem like he's offered fights before. Diaz just doesn't want to take any of them, because I don't think the problem is being offered fights. I think the problem is Diaz getting paid what he feels like he's worth.
I agree with that. And do you think that fight would be against Conor McGregor, or do you think it has to be against Eddie Alvarez or Kevin Lee?
The Conor fight would make sense. I just don't think that they have I don't think they have Conor on board right now. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with it. It's just such a weird time to to be an MMA fan. Conor McGregor has turned the whole world on their head. I'm honestly starting to think, and I want to write a piece on it about Conor McGregor's impact on the UFC is as big and as important as Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar were.
Yeah.
In terms of the future and how fighters are going to be able to make money, and that's not to kiss his ass, but let's call it what it is. We've never seen anyone this big, and honestly, Josh, unless the UFC somewhere down the road here gets a heavyweight who talks like Floyd or Conor and punches like Francis Ngannou, the modern day Mike Tyson, what boxing's been looking for forever. I don't know if we'll ever see a fighter this big again.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Moving on to another topic here, we have the interim title on the line for Luke Rockhold and I'm drawing a blank. Yoel Romero, sorry, and kind of interesting. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that fight that should be coming up soon?
So I think the UFC hopefully learned a lesson here that they should just stop making, no matter what the reason is, don't just make a interim champion a champion. And obviously that's what they are trying to go against because of situations like this. Whitaker was the interim champion. They make him the automatic champion. He gets injured. They don't want to pull a title fight, so now they have another belt for an interim championship. This just doesn't make any sense. This is just so dumb. I love the fight. I'm not saying that these two don't deserve that it shouldn't be a number one contender fight, that they shouldn't. It's a fantastic fight, but it's not for a belt. Neither of them have fought anyone, or I shouldn't say that. Neither of them have any ties to the belt right now whatsoever.
Do you think Do you think there was anybody else deserving of this interim title fight other than Yoel Romero?
No. I know where you're going with this. Obviously, Kelvin Gastelum came out because of his torching of Michael Bisping, and kind of claimed rights to it. But I'm sorry, no. He got pretty well dominated by Chris Weidman, and Weidman is that big body. You see why Kelvin potentially should be down at the welterweight division against guys like Chris Weidman. Luke Rockhold and Yoel Romero are even bigger than Weidman. I think it would just be a absolute shellacking with how big those guys are and how talented they are. It's not just size, it's their talent, and then add in their size as an X factor.
Okay. Makes sense. We have Demetrius Johnson. He wants to fight Dillashaw in July.
He does. I do want to say, did you see? You brought up DJ, and DJ had it on his Instagram as well. The goddamn Predator at UFC 220.
I saw a picture. Yeah,
it was weird, man. I don't have any idea what. Like, honestly, I was half expecting Conor McGregor to rip his mask off and be like, "I'm back, bitches," and it'd be like some crazy thing. It was bizarre. It was so weird. The whole night Predator was sitting there. Yeah, and DJ had it on his Instagram. It was like, this guy's dedicated the whole night. Front row at a UFC event wearing a Predator mask. Crazy.
Pretty impressive.
It had to be someone that the UFC knew. I mean, they don't just let any... I have a feeling that TD Garden would just be cool with someone wearing a Predator mask the whole damn time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Nevertheless, DJ wants TJ International Fight Week. I hope they make it. Makes all the sense in the world to give. I take it back. I only want him to make it if it's for TJ's belt. DJ deserves this. He is the, right now, in my opinion, the pound for pound king. He has just destroyed everyone who's been in front of him. So I think that they should give him the opportunity.
So you think it should be for TJ's belt, not DJ?
Yeah, I think they should reverse it. TJ shouldn't go down. Why are you going to give TJ the opportunity to win 2 belts when he just won it back? No way. Well, okay. you let DJ go up because the flyweight division could deal with and actually use DJ being gone for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
He's like I said, he's beaten everyone. The next guy, the closest guy is Joseph Benavidez, and Demetrius has beat him twice. So it's just not realistic in my opinion. Let the belt be on the shelf for 6 months. Let those guys kind of figure it out. Get a true number one contender. Find a true number one contender, and let DJ go do his thing at 135 pounds.
Chris Cyborg Santos signed her contract, supposedly, and now they're just waiting on one Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, we found out this week on Cyborg's Twitter, going back and forth. It was Megan Anderson, obviously out of Australia, because they were supposed to fight before for the 145-pound belt, and Cyborg made some accusations on Twitter, and then it wasn't actually Cyborg, it was like her coach, and just some weird stuff going on there. But yes, they claim that they have signed their contract. They are waiting for Amanda Nunes to come out. It's a great fight. I'm going to be really excited for the fight. But what does Cyborg gain out of this?
Absolutely nothing. In
my opinion. Like, I get it, it's champion versus champion, but she's from a smaller division. She is now in the, listen, she's not obviously as big by any means, but Ronda Rousey needed a foil, right? Ronda Rousey needed someone to do it. Now, they were hoping for Holly Holm. We're hoping, Ronda would rebound and they could make it a second and a third fight. But they need someone to make Cyborg look human right now. That's what they need. And they're hoping for Amanda Nunes to be that person. I just don't know, especially, you're going to have Amanda go up to 145 pounds, or are they going to try to just do a catch weight at 140? I don't know. I just don't see. I mean, Cyborg struggles making the 140. She had a hard time there. It doesn't make sense to me. They're gonna have to they'll make the fight for Cyborg, but I guarantee you Amanda's gonna be the one getting the big time payday.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. Before the show, we were talking about UFC rankings that came out.
Yes, as we were talking about the interim title. Tony Ferguson. So they had the press. I want to talk about this for a second, Josh, because you were harping on me about it, right?
Yep.
About the interim of the title, and you were still, well, it's going to be for the real title. And I told you beforehand, it should be for the real belt. It should be for the real belt. Tony was promised that his next fight would be for the real belt. I believe it might actually be in his contract. So it was back and forth, and reports were, well, it's not. It is for the real belt. It's not for the real belt. Connor's going to be stripped. He hasn't been stripped. Obviously, the report before was, oh well, Connor, has till March, or he's going to be stripped. This, that, all these reports. So wait for the press conference. We'll find out on Friday at the press conference. So of course, the first person comes on, and Dana dances around it. And the second person comes on, and Dana, in typical Dana fashion, and I am a Dana White supporter. I'm not one of these guys who bash him, but he was just an asshole, plain and simple. Is an asshole, tries to call the guy out, and what, were you not here? Well, make the guy feel stupid, just bully him, and in all honesty, tries to bully him, plays big dick, and then what happens? His arch nemesis Ariel Helwani gets on the mic and at least forces him to answer. Is this for the real belt? Yes, it's for the real belt. And then he flat out asks, why are you so hesitant? Why won't you just say that Conor McGregor's being stripped of the belt? And he says, I wouldn't say that. And Ariel, again, goes back, what are you saying? None of this makes any sense. And they just left it alone. So apparently these guys are, my guess is Dana's trying to sign Conor to a fight. And obviously, they're close, and they have a drop dead date for when the fight has to be signed by.
Yeah.
And if it's not signed by that time, then they will move on. They'll strip them, and they'll have it for the real belt. Because like I said, I do believe that Tony Ferguson said on the MMA Hour on Monday that his next fight has to be for the real belt. So April 7th. I'm sure it's sometime in February, or as Dana alluded to numerous times, Conor has till March to figure it out. Hey, either have the fight signed and ready to go, or on that March we'll strip it, and this is for the real belt.
My assumption, and again, I'm just kind of guessing, I would assume that they would have to make a decision before that Khabib and Tony Ferguson fight. Would they not?
No, I don't think so.
If you say what you said with in Tony Ferguson's contract saying that it's for the actual belt, then wouldn't they have to say, okay, we're going to strip Conor and then this is now for the actual belt?
Josh, if you have you can make, you're the UFC.
I find it hard to believe to say we have two actual belts.
Hear me out. They're not going to say that. This is what they're going to do. You had 2017 where they had a terrible year. They've had Conor 3 times in 2016, right? Monster numbers. 2017, 0 times inside the octagon. So now, if Conor signs the fight in February, March, whatever it is, to fight in June, International Fight Week, Las Vegas, right? What do you think's more likely? Them saying, hey, Tony, if you don't like it, we're just going to scrap the fight. And you can sit and you can wait until Conor McGregor fights, and then you can fight him if he decides to fight you. Or do you think that they're going to say, hey, Conor, we're going to strip you of your belt and you're going to fight for it? No, they've already shown by doing this that they are catering to what Conor McGregor wants. If Conor, they'll try to play Tony nice for a little bit. They'll say, hey, Tony, listen, Conor's coming back and fighting. We're going to have you fight Khabib. The winner's going to fight the winner of Conor and whoever the hell they have Conor fight for the lightweight title at the end of the year. You'll be sitting there front row at Conor's fight. You guys will face off in the octagon after. And you know what? Here's a $100,000 bonus for your troubles. That's what they're going to do. Guarantee you that's what they're going to do, Josh. And if Tony doesn't play along, he doesn't be a good boy, that's fine. Big deal. They've stripped people for less. You remember they stripped friggin' Jermaine Durand to me after she won the interim title after like 3 months. They don't care.
Yeah, true. We'll see what happens, I guess. Anything else news-wise?
That's all I got, Josh. It's been a good show.
All right, man. I agree with you on that. So, again, I guess that's it. That's all we have for you. Again, thank you for Phil Baroni coming out and jumping on the show, of course, interview-wise with Tim. And, yeah, a couple cards coming up, so make sure you guys watch those. And if you guys get time, hit us up on Twitter at PonyKeg Sports and at Fight Talk Tim. And then also go to MMAnews.com. Check out all of Tim's articles and interviews and everything that he does there. And go to our website, PonyKegSports.com. We got a bunch of stuff going on over there as well. So do yourselves a favor and check that out. And last but not least, you guys can always email us, MMANewsPodcast@gmail.com. Tim, last words?
Also, don't forget on Friday, if you're not watching Bellator, LFA, which is on Access TV, LFA 32, Brendan Allen, Ryan Spann, Juan Adams, Zach Fears, a bunch of top prospects. Anthony Hernandez. UFC's been, picking the cherries from the LFA organization, and a lot of guys are coming from there now. So if you want to watch top prospects, you can watch that as well.
All right. For Tim and myself, that's all we got for you guys today. Hope you enjoy. Until next time.
Peace.